Imagine a country that prints the most money in the world. It builds the tallest skyscrapers, the most advanced technologies, and spends more on defense than the next 10 nations combined. Its citizens enjoy the conveniences of modern life, smartphones, cars, luxury goods, and yet the nation is drowning in trillions of dollars of debt. How is it possible that the richest countries in human history are also the most indebted? The answer lies in a paradox few understand. Wealth is not the absence of debt, it is built on it. The United States, Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom, each a powerhouse of production, innovation, and trade, collectively owe more than they produce in a year. Their governments, their corporations, even their citizens, rely on borrowing to sustain what they have built. It is a system designed to appear invincible, yet it is fragile to its core. Every dollar of wealth is tethered to a dollar of obligation. Every modern convenience is financed by the promise of future payment. And when those promises falter, the consequences ripple far beyond borders. This is not just accounting. It is the story of power, control, and human belief, a story that has been repeated across centuries and continents. In the next several minutes, we will uncover why debt and wealth have become inseparable companions, and why the richest nations may also be the most vulnerable. Debt is often portrayed as weakness. Economists warn of defaults, journalists write of crises, citizens fear taxation. But in history, debt has never been mere weakness. It is a tool, a lever to build empires. Consider the 19th century British Empire. Britain borrowed heavily to finance its Industrial Revolution and global navy. Every bond issued allowed factories to rise, railroads to spread, and colonial markets to expand. Debt enabled growth, and growth enabled dominance. The same principle applies today. Wealthy nations issue bonds, massive amounts of government debt, not because they are failing, but because it is profitable to borrow. Interest rates on government bonds in countries like the US are extremely low. Borrowing becomes a way to invest in the nation's own future infrastructure, defense, and social systems, without immediately raising taxes. In other words, debt is not a sign of insolvency. It is a strategic instrument of power. Yet there is a dark edge. The more a country borrows, the more it binds itself to creditors. Who are these creditors? Other governments, banks, pension funds, and global investors. A complex network of entities with the ability to influence policy. Every time the U.S. Treasury issues a bond, the government becomes accountable not just to its citizens, but to anyone who holds its debt. Debt creates leverage. Leverage creates control. Today, the richest countries owe more than ever before. The United States alone carries over $35 trillion in federal debt. Japan exceeds 250% of its GDP. European nations juggle trillions in obligations. On paper, these numbers are alarming. Yet their economies continue to function. Why? Because debt in wealthy nations is fundamentally different from debt in developing ones. Developing countries borrow to survive, to fund schools, infrastructure, and basic services. Their debt carries risk, higher interest rates, default, or economic collapse. Wealthy nations borrow to expand influence, stabilize markets, and maintain liquidity. In essence, the richest countries have turned debt into a mechanism of dominance. Every dollar borrowed is an investment in economic growth, military power, and financial influence. Bond markets and central banks ensure that wealthy nations can borrow cheaply and continuously. And as long as confidence remains, the cycle feeds itself. But there is a hidden cost. Debt is a promise, a contract between the present and the future. Even for the richest countries, the obligation cannot disappear. It only shifts forward in time. This creates a delicate balancing act. Spend too little and growth stalls. Spend too much and confidence falters. Raise taxes to repay and citizens resist. The paradox deepens. The richer the nation, the more it depends on debt to maintain its wealth. Every budget surplus is temporary. Every crisis threatens the illusion of stability. And history shows that when wealthy nations stumble, when faith in their debt falters, the consequences can ripple across the globe. Look at 2008. The U.S., the wealthiest economy in the world, faced a near collapse of its financial system. Trillions of dollars were borrowed overnight to stabilize banks, markets, and governments. Yet the system endured because the world had faith that the U.S. could repay, or at least manage, its obligations. Faith is the true currency of the wealthy. Money, production, and power follow only if belief remains unbroken. To understand why the richest countries are also the most indebted, we must first look at how debt became more than an obligation, how it became a tool of dominance. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States emerged as the preeminent global power. It controlled not just territory or armies, but the very architecture of international finance. The creation of the Bretton Woods system in 1944 fixed the US dollar to gold and pegged other currencies to the dollar. Nations didn't just owe money, they owed it to a system anchored by the richest country in the world. Debt became more than numbers in a ledger, it became influence. Through government bonds, treasury bills, and foreign investment, the US borrowed trillions without fear of default. Its creditworthiness allowed it to spend freely on military campaigns, infrastructure, and innovation. Japan, Germany, and other industrialized nations followed suit. They borrowed to rebuild, to modernize, and to cement their position in a global economy that rewarded scale, efficiency, and stability. What emerges is a paradox. The more a country owes, the more its financial credibility grows. Investors lend not because they trust the government will have cash tomorrow. They trust that the government has power to maintain the economy today. Debt is therefore not weakness, it is proof of dominance. As economies globalized, the wealthy nations perfected a system that tied debt to growth rather than to repayment. Central banks became architects of stability. Quantitative easing, low-interest policies, and massive bond purchases allowed countries to borrow at historically low rates. Debt multiplied, yet the cost of borrowing shrank. The paradox deepened. Nations owed more than they could produce in a single year, yet could sustain those obligations indefinitely. Debt became a renewable resource. But every innovation introduced new fragility. Financial crises no longer stayed contained. A collapse in one nation could ripple worldwide. 2008 revealed this truth in stark terms. American mortgages, once ordinary household debts, triggered the collapse of a global financial network built on interlocking obligations. Yet again, wealthy nations endured, not by reducing debt, but by expanding it further. Trillions were printed, injected, and leveraged, and the world continued to trust the richest countries' obligations implicitly. It is a system that feeds on confidence. As long as the market believes a wealthy country can manage its debt, it can continue to borrow infinitely. But faith is fragile. Confidence can collapse faster than economies can respond. Debt in wealthy nations is fundamentally different from debt in poorer countries. Developing nations borrow to survive. Defaults can trigger immediate crises, famine, or political collapse. Wealthy nations borrow to expand influence. Take the U.S. again. Its $35 trillion federal debt is larger than the GDP of any other nation. Yet investors clamor to buy U.S. Treasury bonds. Why? Because debt is not just an obligation, it is a strategic asset. Every bond purchased gives the issuer leverage over the lender. Nations borrow to maintain military supremacy, stabilize global markets, and shape international trade. Debt, in effect, becomes a currency of influence. The richest countries are also the most interdependent. Their debt weaves a network connecting banks, governments, corporations, and citizens worldwide. Every fluctuation, every fiscal decision reverberates across borders. Wealth allows access to cheap borrowing. Debt ensures loyalty from creditors. The system is self-reinforcing, but dangerously so. Wealth depends on debt, and debt depends on global faith, which can be withdrawn in an instant. Here lies the uncomfortable truth. Wealth and debt are two sides of the same coin. The richer a nation becomes, the more it relies on borrowing to maintain its position. The more debt it accumulates, the more its citizens, markets, and global partners are entwined in a fragile web of obligations. No country truly owns its wealth. Instead, it manages it through borrowed faith, confidence in the currency, the government, and the economy itself. And when confidence falters, the consequences are catastrophic. Rapid inflation, collapsed currencies, or even global financial crises. The system allows enormous power, but it is inherently unstable. Debt is not just an economic instrument, it is a psychological one. It governs behavior, shapes policy, and dictates the limits of sovereignty. The wealthiest nations are not free from risk, they are uniquely exposed. They occupy a high wire without a net. Massive wealth, massive debt, and the world watching every step. We often equate wealth with freedom. We admire skyscrapers, technologies, and GDP rankings. But wealth built on debt is never absolute. It is conditional, temporary, dependent. The richest nations in history are also the most indebted because debt allows them to expand, innovate, and influence. It buys stability, infrastructure, and dominance, but it also binds them to obligations, creditors, and global confidence. History teaches that the most powerful empires fall not through lack of wealth, but through over-reliance on borrowed faith. Rome, Spain, and Britain all amassed riches and obligations, only to face crises when their financial leverage reached its limits. Today, the United States, Japan, and the European Union navigate a similar tightrope. They are stronger, wealthier, and more interconnected than any empire before. Yet the mechanisms of their strength, debt, leverage, and borrowed confidence, carry risks as existential as their power is grand. Debt is no longer just money owed. It is power, influence, and control. And in a world where faith drives economies faster than production, the richest nations may also be the most vulnerable. We call them wealthy, but in truth, their wealth is borrowed. And the cost of repayment may one day redefine what it means to be powerful.